Groningen, for everybody, especially people from abroad coming to our city. We appreciate that. I also appreciate that we work together with the Frisian community of Dantemadale. I think this is a very interesting example that people from Frisian and Groningen can work very closely together and learn from each other instead of fighting with each other, which is also the public image, but it's not true. What is true is that we can really work together, and I appreciate that. What I would like to do this morning is, apart from welcome you in Groningen and tell a little bit about the city, is not talking that much about the solutions e-government and new technology offers to democracy, because I feel that in this day and next day, a lot of information is being given about the technical possibilities. I'd like to talk a little bit more today why it is necessary to use these opportunities, because we have big problems, perhaps bigger problems than many people realize. Here in Groningen, this is a city of about 180,000 people, so it's what I used to call a small world city, but it's a big provincial city. In this city, 3% of the population is organized in a political party. So only 3% pays its membership fees to a political party. That means that the city council is recruited, people in that council are being recruited from a very limited number of people. You can say you fish in a pond with very, very few fishes. This is the first problem, that political parties, not only in the Netherlands, but all over Europe, have a very limited basis. And the basis is getting more limited. It's not widening, it's getting more limited. That means that in terms of recruitment, looking for good councillors, looking for good members of parliament, the political system is looking to a very limited part of the population. The second point is that in a democracy, the illusion is that you govern a city or you govern a country. But in terms of influence, the government or the city administration is only dealing with a small part of reality. Many decisions are being taken outside the political arena. Whether a company is willing to invest in a city, or whether a private person is willing to spend money, is not up to the government, it's not up to the city administration. This is a decision of a private company or of a private person. Whether or not a hospital is functioning well, and coming from Great Britain, some of you have come some discussions about hospitals, I noticed. Whether a hospital is functioning well is not up to the city administration. It's up to the hospital, the people working there, and the people financing the hospital. Whether schools are modern enough and interesting enough, it's not up to the city, even if they are an educational authority or are in charge of the schools. Professionals are making many decisions outside the political arena, which influence daily life of people. So not only is the recruitment of the people in the political system on a very limited basis, the problems government are facing are not to be solved in the political arena, but outside. So this is a piece of theater where many actors are not civil servants and not politicians, but of other persuasions. And there we go to the heart of the problem. Because in a democracy, we elect our councillors and we elect our members of parliament, and they elect, or they make sure that there is an executive. But the number of possibilities they have to really influence daily life are limited. And you see all over Europe that the population is looking towards politics with a lot of cynicism. And not only because they feel that their problems are not well addressed. They feel that they're not being taken care of well enough. So this is criticism to the services the government is providing, but it is more fundamental. People have the idea that the political system and their daily life are not walking in the same direction. That politicians are talking about things people do not care about that much, and vice versa. So the reason e-government, e-democracy, is high on the agenda now is not because we're also very fond of technological solutions, or we like internet so very much. I do, but this is not the main point. The main point is that if we want to have a lively democracy where people feel that they are part of that democracy, we have to look for new ways to have a dialogue with our population. Over the last 10, 20, 30 years after the Second World War, most countries in Western Europe have become centralized countries where politics deals with two factors, with money and with laws. Every politician feels that he can change society by either putting money into something or make a law to force the development in a certain direction. And one of the tragic things over the last years is that neither the budget nor the law is sufficiently efficient, is sufficiently really having influence on the development of society. And the reason is just what I gave you, because politics is only one segment of society. It's only one dimension of governing and developing a city. So there, communication comes into our debate. You could say that on a city hall or on a department on a national scale, civil servants most times deal with putting money into good cases or making rules, regulations. These are the two sports they are good at. The National Advisory Committee I was the chairman of advised the government not only to look for the money and the laws, but make communication as important as money and laws. That means if you want to develop a new policy, then you should not only tell your civil servants that they should design this new policy in terms of finding the money for it or making the regulations for it, but that you should communicate on this new policy from the beginning on. This sounds very common, very clever, but it is much more complicated than many people realize. The reason is that civil servants and politicians together are, in a sense, a working unit. They are communicating with each other. And the people outside City Hall or outside the department, the people living in the city, are regarded as the subjects of their policy. So they're being looked at the people you have to sell that policy, or you have to force that policy upon them. They're not looked at the people who could have ideas, which would be very useful in the development of the policy. Of course, we have our debates with the people in our cities, but I will give you two examples out of this city where communication played a very important role and changed our policies. As you know, we have in all countries drug-related problems. And we have, for instance, people who have no home, sleep on the street, and they cause a lot of trouble for themselves and for other people. So we wanted to have a house where those people could sleep overnight. But of course, this type of facility is not very popular. Nobody comes to City Hall and say, please give me such a facility in my street. It would be nice to have a facility like that in my backyard. So we made a small note in which we described 3 or 4 of this type of facilities. A place where drug addicts could use drugs. It's a small room, a small house where they could go to, use the drugs instead of doing this on the street. We looked for a house where people could sleep. So we had several of these, let's say, not so popular facilities. And then we went to the city and said, well, look here, these 5 facilities, we need to look, we need to create a place for these facilities. And look at you, we picked your street for one of those facilities, and I want to debate this with you. You can understand this was a huge debate in the city. But we didn't make any decision before that debate really took place. And some people said it's okay if this facility comes in our street, but there are some prerequisites where you have to deal with before you bring this facility to our street. And in this dialogue, our plan changed. Some facilities we really couldn't put in the place we advocated in the beginning. And some facilities we could, but only if some other requirements were fulfilled. If you look back on the process, it took a lot of time, a lot of energy of the civil servant and the councillor who was active on this field. But in the end, we were possible for all the 5 awkward facilities to look to get this place. Well, this is what I call a constructive dialogue. Give the facts, give the figures, make it possible to take people in the city serious and look for solutions together. Well, this sounds very idealistic or very optimistic, but our experience is that if you are willing to do so, both parties, and the people and the politicians, are satisfied in the end. So this is only one example. The problem is, and I should be very frank with you about this, politicians are always looking for a product. They want to realize something. They have a program and want to build so many houses. They want to change some schools. They want to do with the traffic, and they want the pedestrians here and the cyclists there. They have a program in their head. So when they start governing, they're only interested in having this program realized. But there is something else apart from the program, and this is what you could call the process. In what way are we dealing with each other? Are we listening? Are we interested in what someone else is telling us? And in many countries, many city halls, and in many countries, many governments are most times interested in results on their own program and not in organizing the process in a way that people really can participate. So when you're talking about e-democracy these days, you're talking about a phenomena which is in essence not popular with people in charge in politics, because it is in a sense a different attitude towards politics. It says that you should not only be interested in the result and the product, but you should be as interested in the process, the way we deal with each other. And then you've got internet. Then the development in the connection between the personal computer and television is going very rapidly. It won't take a lot of time if we can have a constructive dialogue with the television screen using your PC in your own room. So the government can ask many questions directly to the population. It will be a couple of years. But then you only ought to ask a question when you're interested in the answer. And this is the problem. The problem is that the technology makes it possible to ask many questions, to listen and to hear. But if politics are really only, in essence, interested in realizing the programs they've been elected on, then the use of those new technologies will be very limited. And this is, I think, the main challenge for the debate here these days. I believe that representative democracy is in big trouble. Not only because the limited recruitment of councillors and members of parliament, the 3% of the city organized in a party where I told you about, but also because very important players in society are not within the political framework. Investors, media, individual people, who all make decisions to influence society, and the political arena is only of limited meaning in the shaping of society. So it is very important that people who believe in representative democracy, as I do, understand the limitations of that representation and look for other ways of adding to representative democracy other means of hearing the voice of the people and being willing to listen. Now, in closing, because I don't want to talk too long, in the papers you've been reading for this debate, this forum, there are many questions about whether this is threatening for the development of e-democracy, threatening for representative democracy or not. In my view, it's strengthening representative democracy on one condition, and I want to say this very clearly. The voice of the people is not the same as governing a city. You cannot govern a city by referendum. You cannot govern the city in terms of e-democracy by one man, one vote, and only the people who vote have an influence. This is in the end threatening for representative for democratic representation. So you should be very careful in the expectations you organize when you go into e-democracy. You should always be very clear that you do not have a city council in vain. You do not have councillors in vain. You do not have members of parliament in vain. You have them to make decisions in the end. If you make that very clear, then you can see before you make decisions in the political arena that the game is very much changed by e-democracy, because with real problems, you go to real people and you ask them real questions and you listen to their answers and take them into account when you make your plans. If you do that, your plans will be strengthened, and decision-making process in the political arena will be strengthened. So there is a huge influence via e-democracy. But you should, I feel, always defend the fact that elected councillors and elected members of parliament have, in the end of the decision-making process in a democracy, a separate responsibility. And I feel that those people advocating referenda and advocating much more direct democracy sometimes forget that direct democracy cannot come into the place of representative democratization. So there's a balance you have to look for. Well, I thought it was, I hoped it was of some use, that I did not go into the technical details of what e-democracy can do. I'm quite sure many people will talk about this in the coming hours. But what I wanted to make clear is that this is not, it is fun, the chairman is right. It is fun to work with e-democracy, but it's not only fun. It is also a necessity for a democracy which is under pressure, and it is a necessity to politicians and to all other people, civil servants committed to the public cause in a democracy, that they reorganize the way they have a dialogue with their own communities. So this was what I want to say, and again, welcome in Groningen.